Hello and welcome to iCatholic. I'm Wendy Grace. Well, of course, hearts are breaking across the world with the situation in the Ukraine as it continues to evolve. But how does the Irish Church respond to this war? And how does the global church respond? And what has Pope Francis said about the situation? Well, join with me in the studio to talk about what's happening here in Ireland. I have Bishop Brendan Leahy, and Austen Ivereigh is joining us as well online, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about Pope Francis' response. Austen, let's start with that. What has Pope Francis said in relation to what's happening in Ukraine?
Well, heartbroken is exactly the word that he's used, and he's spoken about how God is not with those who would impose their will through weapons. He's called for, of course, humanitarian corridors for people to receive the now 1.5, maybe even 2 million refugees who have fled Ukraine. And he said last Sunday, he said, we will do everything. We here in the Vatican, the Holy See, will do everything and anything it takes in the cause of peace. And shortly after, he sent two cardinals who work very closely with him from the Vatican. One is in Hungary, the other is in Poland, helping to coordinate the relief efforts, but also to bring the message of Pope Francis to the refugees, to the situation, to the people there, an assurance of his closeness and that he's just working hard for peace in this desperate situation.
I wanted to go to Bishop Leahy now just about Ireland's response and the Irish Church's response. Tell us a little bit about, I know the Bishop's made a statement recently. Talk to me about that.
Well, of course, I think first and foremost, we're so much part of it now because we're watching it every day. We're seeing images of it on social media. It's very much part of our lives now. There's been huge outpouring of solidarity, certainly in Ireland. We've seen an enormous response to all the agencies or bodies that are looking for help, from the Red Cross to Trócaire to other agencies, obviously many agencies. And that's a real sign, number one, of the generosity of the Irish people. And I think this somehow has also captured imagination. They want to help, they want to give. So the Irish Church has said several obvious points. Let's keep praying, let's keep asking, let's keep knocking the door, let's keep searching, let's keep saying peace, peace, peace. Let's promote as much as we can diplomacy to try and get a solution to this and encourage our own politicians to do their part on the European level. But also, obviously then too, we think of the specific humanitarian needs that are directly obvious. So as a church in Ireland, we're going to have a national collection in end of the last weekend of March. And that'll be our attempt to respond practically as well. Of course, we have our agencies. We have the Trócaire Agency, the Jesuit Refugee Agency, the Aid to the Church in Need. So we're saying to people, look, these agencies are directly linked with people on the ground in those countries because the Church obviously has its counterparts in those countries. So we can also help directly, you know.
And I know there's already been an incredible response to an appeal the Red Cross put out about people offering their homes. Something like 9,000 people have already registered saying, we will open our doors to you. What a beautiful Christian response to this crisis. Those people are opening their hearts, opening their homes. You spoke recently, Bishop Lee, in a homily saying that a dream has been shattered with this war. Talk to me about that.
Well, I think people, just the sheer fact that Europe was constructed after the Second World War, and it was a dream to try and say, never again war on our continent. We saw such devastating effects of a war twice in one century. And as Pope John Paul II said, Pope Francis says, war is always a defeat for humanity. So the great dream had taken hold in Europe. We had hoped that we had now finally established a solid culture of peace. So this has come in as a real bolt against that. And maybe it's woken us up to the fact you can't take dreams for granted. You have to work at them. Peace is a fruit of unity. The unity we were trying to construct in Europe is important. It's really important. But therefore, we can't take it for granted. And maybe we've allowed Europe just get on with it, and we've got settled into the institutions are doing their work. It's all out there in Brussels somewhere. But actually, no, the European dream requires us to work, to commit ourselves to it. And I think this is a wake-up call to us.
It's a wake-up call, as you say, in some ways. But one thing I think that people will be wondering is, when they're looking at, as you say, what's coming on the social media feeds, the news feeds, when we're seeing directly just the suffering that's unimaginable, Where is God in all of this? I'll put that question to you both, Austen.
Well, I think God is in the kind of response that Bishop Leahy was just outlining, the way, and you were saying, Wendy, the way people have opened their doors, their hearts, the way they have rushed to help the people fleeing, and just in the gestures of support. Some of them, I think, very very touching, very practical, very concrete. I think here you're seeing the Western Christian conscience of Europe being awoken, and there's something is stirring here. You know, something that is very definitely good is being stirred in response to this darkness, and it clearly is darkness because this is all about power and domination, the libido dominandi, as Saint Augustine took it, the desire to dominate, which clearly drives Putin's forces. I think one of the things I think we have to be very careful about in this is not to demonize Russia and Russians, because from what we've seen, those conscripts who were sent in by Putin, 18, 19-year-old, dazed and confused, they clearly don't know why they're there. War has victims on all sides. So I think one of the things that we can do as Christians is just to keep coming back to our shared dignity, our shared humanity, and to remember that while the forces of evil have been unleashed, we must always defend the good in the face of that evil. And so therefore it's a time of testing, and all crises test us. You know, they sift us, to use the language of the Bible. And this is definitely a time when we're going to be sifted in a big way.
It's an important point, that Christian response to each person willed and loved by God. I just want to go back to this idea of the wake-up call, and you're both talking about it in interesting ways, but is it also a moment for people to recognise and realise that, of course, the things that people are doing on the ground are incredible, but I have been particularly struck by religious brothers and sisters, missionaries that are staying put, they're doing whatever they can, you know, putting their lives on the line to support people of Ukraine. A reminder of not just the Christian heritage across Europe, but the work that's ongoing every day that we often forget about.
But the solidarity ultimately starts with small gestures as well. But the small immediate gestures, obviously, I think the gospel, this is going to be something put up to us all, I think, quite soon. We're going to see, literally in Ireland, arriving tens of thousands of refugees quite soon. And the gospel mandate is going to ask all of us, well, what can we do to welcome people in our homes, in our houses? I know, and I've been inspired by this, I've heard of people already reviewing their own home situation. I know of two friends of mine, a couple whose family now have grown up. They've got a relatively big house, they're living in it on their own, and they're asking themselves, well, do we need to look at this and say, can we take in maybe a mother and a child? Could we take in somebody? So that kind of, those gestures of hospitality express who we are, and I think begin to create a cultural response. And for Ireland, that's going to be important as we go forward, because we want to be a people of welcome. We're coming up, we always talk about St. Patrick and we're a culture of welcome and all this, but this will certainly put it up to us. Yeah,
and that response. I'm finally just to ask you, Austen, for people watching this today that feel, in a sense, a little bit helpless. Yes, there's some practical things that we've touched on, and we're able to do those. But from a spiritual perspective, how do we respond?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to manage in this time is our own sense of frustration and powerlessness. I know I felt that. I've, been awake at night sometimes after seeing those pictures. And I suppose this is where we have to believe in the power of prayer, that actually the fact that we care, the fact that we're concerned, the fact that we call on the Lord and that we ask for his mercy in this situation, it is not a futile act, that is good for us, it's good for the world, and that somehow something new will come of this, that God will not abandon us. I mean, in every tribulation, in every suffering, there is always a grace on offer. There is always a possibility that the Spirit is trying to work. And so we need to become channels of that Spirit and that grace, whoever we are, wherever we are, whatever our situation is. And we can do that just in the simple act of prayer. We can do it obviously in concrete actions. And I suppose it's for everybody to discern and ask themselves, what am I being asked to do now at this time when we are all being tested and called to step up to the plate?
Well, yes, I think the word action is what you talk about. At the end of the day, that's what we're being called to now. But I mean, that doesn't deny that we start with prayer. And I think that has to be emphasised as well. We are the people of prayer. This is a situation which requires an intervention also from a higher power, we'll put it that way, from God. We believe in that. But we must do the action on the ground as well.
Bishop Leahy and Austen Ivereigh, thank you so much for joining us on iCatholic today. And as has been mentioned throughout this conversation, there's so many different agencies doing amazing work on the ground. The Irish Red Cross, Trócaire, Aid to the Church in Need, the list goes on. So do make sure that you connect up with one of those agencies to offer your support in whatever way you can.